The air in the derelict forge was wrong. Not the usual stale reek of Stygian Hold's underhive, thick with rust and the acrid tang of spent promethium, but something heavier, something alive. Scitarius Kale 9 moved through the shadowed aisles of Manufactorum Zeta 12, his servo joints whispering in the silence. His augmetic eyes scanned the darkness, their crimson glow catching on the hulks of dormant machinery. The forge had been abandoned for decades, its once proud assembly lines left to rot after a catastrophic reactor failure during the third purge of Stygian Hold. Yet, as Kale 9 patrolled, his sensors registered an anomaly. The machines were warm, not the residual heat of decaying isotopes, but a pulsing organic warmth, like the breath of a sleeping beast. Kale 9's neural uplink to the forge's machine spirits was silent, a void where binary hymns should have sung praises to the Omnissiah. He was a vanguard, his body a lattice of augmetics and rad-soaked flesh, built to endure the toxic underbelly of the hive. But tonight, his rad counter clicked erratically, and his flesh itched beneath the ceramite plates, a sensation his augments should have suppressed. He paused beside a towering assembly rig, its pistons frozen mid-motion, and noticed something unnatural. A faint, glistening sheen on the metal, like sweat on skin. His gloved hand brushed the surface, and the rig twitched, a subtle, involuntary shudder that sent a spike of static through his neural feeds. Anomaly detected, he voxed to his overseer, Tech Priest Calver 6, stationed in a distant spire. Machinery exhibits non-standard behavior, requesting analysis protocols. The response was a burst of binary static, unintelligible, as if the Vox relay itself resisted clarity. Kelnian's logic circuits flagged the interference as environmental, but his human remnants, those slivers of intuition the Mechanicus had failed to excise, whispered of something else, something watching. He advanced deeper into the forge, his rad carbine held low but ready. The air grew thicker, carrying a faint, sweet odor, like rotting fruit laced with ozone. His helmet's lumens illuminated a cluster of pipes along the ceiling, their surfaces no longer smooth, but mottled with strange growths. Pale, fleshy tendrils that pulsed faintly, weaving into the metal like veins. Kale 9's data tether logged the sight, but his mind, conditioned to reject fear, faltered. These were not the crude fungal blooms common to the underhive's damp corners. They moved with purpose, curling toward him as if drawn by his body heat. A memory flickered, unbidden, through his neural matrix, a fragment from before his augmentation, when he was still human, still Kale. A child's voice, his own, crying out in a hab block as green spores drifted through a shattered window during an orc raid. The memory was irrelevant, a glitch, yet it lingered, sharp and raw. He shook it off, his servo skull drifting closer to scan the growths. Its auspex pinged, detecting organic compounds inconsistent with known flora. The readings suggested Tyranid influence, impossible, as Stygian Hold's last Tyranid incursion was centuries past, purged by the Ordo Xenos. Yet the data was clear. The growths were alive, and they were thinking. Kale 9 followed the tendrils to a sealed bulkhead, its surface etched with Mechanicus seals, now defaced by organic corrosion. His augmetic hand interfaced with the lock, but the panel sparked, rejecting his codes. A low hum emanated from beyond, not mechanical but resonant, like a heartbeat. His flesh itched again, and he noticed a faint green glow beneath his gauntlet, where his skin met the augmetic seals. He tore the glove free, revealing tiny, luminescent spores clinging to his flesh, pulsing in sync with the tendrils. His logic circuit screamed to report this as contamination, but his Vox was dead, drowned in static that now carried a faint whisper. Not words, but a sensation of hunger. The bulkhead groaned, unsealing itself without his command. Beyond lay a chamber that should not exist, its walls a hybrid of steel and flesh, pulsating with bioluminescent veins. At its center stood a machine, or what had once been a machine, a forge altar, its cogitator core now encased in writhing, organic tissue. It pulsed, and Kale-9's own augmetics pulsed in response, as if answering a call. The air grew heavy with the scent of decay and electricity, and the whisper in his mind grew louder, promising memories of a life he had forsaken. He raised his carbine, but his hand trembled, not from fear, but from a longing he could not name. The chamber beyond the bulkhead was a blasphemy against the Omnissiah. Skitarius Kale-9 stood frozen, his rad carbine aimed at the pulsating forge altar, its cogitator, core now a grotesque fusion of steel and flesh. The air in Manufactorum, Zeta-12's hidden lab, was thick with the cloying scent of decay, undercut by a sharp tang of ozone that stung his organic lungs. His augmetic eyes adjusted to the dim bioluminescence, revealing walls that seemed to breathe, their surfaces rippling with tendrils that wove seamlessly into rusted circuitry. The tendrils pulsed in rhythm with the altar, each throb sending a faint tremor through Kale-9's own augmetics, as if the machine were whispering directly to his implants. He stepped forward, boots sinking slightly into a floor with a thin, slick film of organic matter. His servo skull hovered at his shoulder, its auspex whirring as it scanned the chamber. The readings flooded his neural feeds. Organic compounds with Tyranid markers, yet altered, hybridized with Mechanicus alloys. The data logs suggested this was no natural mutation, but a deliberate experiment, abandoned yet still alive. Kale-9's logic circuits flagged the findings as tech heresy, but the itch in his flesh, where spores had clung to his skin, grew sharper, and with it came another unbidden memory. A woman's voice, his mother's, singing a lullaby in a hab block before the Mechanicus claimed him. The memory was irrelevant, a glitch, yet it felt as real as the chamber's humid air. He approached a data slate embedded in the wall, its screen cracked but faintly glowing. Interfacing with it, he bypassed corrupted security protocols, revealing fragmented logs from a long-dead tech priest, Magos Biologus Vrena. The logs detailed experiments in Zeta-12, initiated after the second purge of Stygian hold, when a Tyranid splinter fleet breached the hive's lower levels. Vrena had recovered bioforms, spores, and tissue samples, believing they could enhance Mechanicus augmetics. Her notes spoke of a living circuitry that could adapt without human intervention, a machine-flesh hybrid that promised resilience beyond Imperial technology. But the experiments failed catastrophically, the bioforms proving uncontainable, merging with the Forge's systems. The final entry was a warning. The flesh remembers. It hungers for what it was. Kale-9's hand twitched, his augmetic fingers curling involuntarily as the altar's hum grew louder, resonating in his chest. He noticed his gauntlet again, the spores now spreading, forming faint, vein-like patterns across his ceramite. His rad counter screamed, detecting a surge in biological activity, and his vox remained dead, drowned in static that now carried distinct syllables. Not words, but a cadence, like a plea. He severed the connection to the data slate, but the altar pulsed faster, and the tendrils on the walls reached toward him, their tips glistening with a viscous fluid that sparked with electrical arcs. He retreated to a console near the chamber's edge, its cogitator partially intact. Plugging in, he accessed a schematic of the forge, revealing a network of hidden conduits linking this lab to the main assembly lines. The conduits were alive, pulsing with the same organic matter, channeling it through the forge like blood through veins. Kale-9's logic circuits calculated a 93% probability the hybrid was spreading, reactivating the forge's dormant systems. He tried to vox Tech Priest Calver 6 again, but the static now formed a voice, his own, from a life he no longer owned, begging him to come back. His augmetics itched unbearably, and he tore open a panel on his arm, revealing circuitry interwoven with fleshy growths, pulsing green. The sight should have triggered a purge protocol, but instead, he felt a pull, a yearning to touch the altar, to let it know him. The chamber's walls shuddered, and the altar's core emitted a low moan, not mechanical, but alive, as if waking from a long sleep. Kale-9 raised his carbine, but his aim wavered, his augmetic hand resisting his command. The tendrils on the walls slithered closer, and the voice in his mind grew louder, promising to restore what the Mechanicus had taken, his humanity, his memories, his soul. The forge awoke with a shudder that shook the bones of Manufactorum Zeta 12. Scutarius Kale-9 stumbled as the floor beneath him pulsed, the organic film coating it now writhing like a living thing. The chamber's bioluminescent glow intensified, casting grotesque shadows that danced across walls woven with fleshy tendrils and rusted circuitry. The forge altar at the center thrummed louder, its heartbeat like rhythm syncing with Kale-9's augmetics, sending jolts through his neural feeds. His rad carbine hung limp in his grip, its machine spirit silent, as if cowed by the abomination before him. The air was thick with the sweet rot stench, now laced with a metallic tang that clung to his tongue, seeping past his respirator's failing filters. Kale-9's servo skull darted erratically, its auspex overwhelmed by the chamber's rising biosignals. The readings confirmed the hybrid's spread. The organic circuitry had infiltrated the forge's main systems, reactivating assembly lines in distant sectors. He heard them now, distant clanks and groans of machinery stirring to life, not with the precision of Mechanicus design, but with an erratic, almost animalistic cadence. His logic circuit screamed warnings of tech heresy, but his flesh burned where the spores had taken root, their green glow spreading beneath his ceramite skin. The itch was no longer just physical. It was a voice, his own, whispering from a life he'd buried under augments. "Kale," it said, soft as a mother's lullaby, "you were more than this." He staggered to a control dais, its surface slick with organic residue, and interfaced with a cogitator, hoping to shut down the forge's systems. The machine resisted, its data streams corrupted with fragments of Tyranid biocode, interwoven with Mechanicus algorithms. The logs he accessed were a descent into madness, magos biologis. Vrenna's final entries described the hybrid as a gift from the Tyranids, a bioform that could merge with human and machine to create a new form of life. She had willingly let it consume her, believing it was the Omnissiah's will. Her last recorded act was to seal the lab, sacrificing herself to contain the spread, or so she thought. The hybrid had not been contained. It had waited, growing in the dark, feeding on the forge's forgotten power. The altar's hum grew into a chorus, a cacophony of voices that weren't human, but carried human pain. Screams, pleas, laughter, all woven into a single, maddening song. Kale-9's augmetic arms spasmed, its circuits sprouting fleshy growths that pulsed in time with the altar. He tore open another panel on his chest, revealing a lattice of wires now entwined with sinewy tendrils, their green luminescence mimicking the chamber's glow. His logic protocols flagged this as contamination, urging self-termination. But the voices in his mind, his own, his mother's, a child's, begged him to listen, to remember. They promised a life before the Mechanicus, before the pain of augmentation. before Stygian holds endless decay. The forge's machinery roared to life around him, assembly arms jerking into motion, crafting not weapons or servitors, but grotesque hybrids, amalgams of metal and flesh, half-formed limbs twitching as they emerged from vats of viscous fluid. Kale 9's servo skull emitted a binary screech, its machine spirit corrupted before it fell silent, its optics glowing green. He fired his carbine at an advancing construct, its body a mockery of a servitor, but the rounds sank into its flesh without effect, absorbed like water into sand. The construct's hollow eyes, empty sockets glowing with the same light as the altar, fixed on him, and it spoke his name in a voice that was his own, from a past he could no longer deny. Kale 9 fled deeper into the chamber, driven by a mix of duty and fear, seeking the forge's power core to overload it. The tendrils on the walls lashed out, grazing his armor, each touch amplifying the voices in his mind. They showed him visions, a boy running through a hab block, a family lost to an orc raid. The moment the Mechanicus took him, cutting away his humanity. The memories were not his alone. They were the forge's, the hybrids, a collective of stolen lives now woven into its flesh. He realized the hybrid wasn't just Tyrannid. It was Stygian Hold itself, a hive that had absorbed the pain of its people, their wars, their augmentations, and now sought to reclaim them. He reached a conduit shaft, its walls pulsating with the hybrid's veins, leading to the core. His augmetics were failing, his movements sluggish as the fleshy growths spread, fusing with his systems. The voices grew louder, promising freedom if he surrendered, promising he could be Kale again. But duty to the Omnissiah held him, a fragile thread against the tide of memory. The shaft's end loomed, and with it, the core, a pulsating mass of flesh and machine, its glow blinding. Kale 9 raised his carbine, knowing one shot could end it, or end him. The conduit shaft pulsed like a living artery, its walls slick with the hybrid's fleshy tendrils, glowing with a sickly, green light that drowned Scutarius Kale 9's augmetic vision. The air in Manufactorum Zeta 12 was suffocating. Miasma of rotting sweetness and sparking ozone that overwhelmed his failing respirator. His boots sank into the organic sludge coating the floor, each step a struggle as the tendrils reached for him, brushing his ceramite armor with a lover's caress. The forge's core loomed ahead, a colossal mass of flesh and machine, its surface writhing with circuitry that pulsed like veins, its heartbeat deafening, resonating in Kale 9's chest, his augmetics, his very soul. The voices in his mind, his own, his mother's, a child's, swelled into a chorus, no longer pleading but commanding. Join us. Become whole. Kale 9's rad carbine trembled in his grip, its machine spirit corrupted, its barrel now sprouting faint, fleshy growths that mirrored the core's grotesque form. His neural feeds were a storm of errors, his logic circuits screaming of contamination levels exceeding 87%, yet he could not activate the self-purge protocol. The hybrid's influence was too deep, its spores woven into his augmetics, threading through his flesh like roots. He tore open another panel on his torso, revealing a lattice of wires, now fully entwined with pulsating tendrils, their green glow spreading to his organic heart. The sight should have driven him to end it, to honor the Omnissiah with his termination. But the voices promised something greater, a return to the boy he'd been, before Stygian Hold, before the Mechanicus carved away his humanity. He staggered closer to the core, its hum of physical force that pressed against his skull. His servo skull, now a traitor to its machine spirit, hovered beside him, its optics glowing green, emitting a low drone that echoed the core's rhythm. Data fragments flooded his feeds, stolen from the Forge's corrupted cogitators. Magos Biologies. Vrenna's experiments had not failed. They had succeeded too well. The Tyranid bioform, seeded in the hive during the Second Purge, had not been a mere spore, but a fragment of the hive mind, designed to infiltrate and adapt. It had merged with the Forge's systems, learning from Mechanicus technology, feeding on the psychic residue of Stygian Hold's endless wars. It wasn't just a machine or a creature, it was a new evolution, a hybrid that saw humanity and machine as raw material for its own design. The core pulsed faster, and the Forge's machinery roared, assembly arms crafting monstrosities that crawled from vats, their bodies a fusion of servitor parts and Tyranid flesh. One approached Kale 9, its hollow eyes, sockets of glowing green, reflecting his own face, distorted, human. It spoke in his voice, not from memory but from the hive mind's echo, a collective will that had absorbed his past. Kale, it said, we are one. He fired, the carbine's rounds sinking into its flesh, only for the wounds to close, the hybrid absorbing the energy, growing stronger. The chamber shook, walls contracting like a living organ, and Kale 9 realized the Forge itself was part of the entity, a vast organism waking to claim Stygian hold. He reached the core's base, its surface hot and slick, pulsing with a rhythm that matched his faltering heartbeat. His augmetics were no longer his own. His arm moved without command, reaching toward the core as if to merge. The voices surged, showing him visions. A hive transformed, its people and machines fused into a single, perfect entity, free from the Imperium's decay, from the Mechanicus's cold dogma. But he saw the truth beneath, the hive mind's echo, using Stygian hold as a crucible to birth a new Tyranid strain, one that could infiltrate the Imperium's heart. His duty to the Omnissiah clashed with the pull of his lost humanity, the hybrid exploiting both to draw him in. Kale 9's free hand found a plasma grenade on his belt, its machine spirit still pure, untainted. He primed it, the countdown a silent prayer to the Omnissiah. But the tendrils lashed out, wrapping his arm, burrowing into his augmetics. Pain seared through him, not just physical but existential, as the hybrid tried to rewrite his mind, to make him its herald. He saw his mother's face, clear now, her eyes hollow, not with sorrow but with the same green glow. You are enough, she whispered, but it was the hive mind's lie. With a scream, human, not machine, he tore free, the grenade still clutched in his hand, the core's light blinding as it sensed his defiance. The core of Manufactorum, Zeta 12, pulsed with a ferocity that shook the chamber, its fleshy machinery convulsing as if sensing its own end. Scitarius Kale 9 stood before it, his ceramite armor cracked, his augmetics overrun with writhing tendrils that glowed with the hybrid's sickly green light. The plasma grenade in his hand ticked down, its machine spirit a faint beacon of purity in the chaos of his corrupted systems. The air was a choking haze of spores and ozone, the sweet rot stench now a suffocating weight that drowned his failing respirator. The voices in his mind, his own, his mother Livingston's, the hive mind's, screamed as one, promising salvation, promising Kale if he would only surrender. But Kale 9, forged in the Mechanicus's unyielding doctrine, clung to the Omnissiah's truth, even as his flesh betrayed him. His augmetic arm, now a grotesque fusion of circuitry and pulsating flesh, fought his command, the tendrils burrowing deeper, fusing with his nerves. His vision flickered, overlaid with visions of Stygian hold transformed, a hive of flesh and steel, its people remade into a single organism, their minds linked in the hive mind's embrace. The core's heartbeat thundered, each pulse sending waves of energy through the chamber. animating the hybrid constructs that crawled from the vats. They surrounded him, their hollow eyes, glowing sockets of green, reflecting his own face, twisted into something neither human nor machine. "You are us," they intoned, their voices a chorus of his stolen memories, his mother's lullaby, warped into a tyrannid hymn. Kale 9's logic circuits, nearly drowned in biocode, calculated a 98% probability of failure. The hybrid had spread too far, its tendrils woven into the Forge's systems, into the hive's infrastructure, into him. His servo skull, now fully corrupted, hovered above, its optics pulsing in sync with the core, emitting a drone that carried the hive mind's echo. Yet, in the grenade's faint hum, he heard the Omnissiah's call, a command to purge, to sacrifice. He tore his augmetic arm free from the tendril's grip, the pain searing through his organic core, and slammed the grenade against the core's surface. The fleshy machinery recoiled, shrieking in a language that was neither binary nor human, a sound that tore at his soul. The explosion was a white-hot nova, its blast wave hurling Kale 9 against the chamber's wall. The core erupted in a cascade of molten flesh and sparking circuitry, its heartbeat stilled. The chamber convulsed, walls collapsing as the hybrid's network faltered, machinery grinding to a halt. Kale 9's augmetics sparked, his systems failing, but he crawled through the wreckage, his flesh burning where the spores had rooted. His vision dimmed, but he saw the constructs collapse, their forms dissolving into pools of organic sludge. The hive mind's echo silenced, for now. He staggered into the underhive's tunnels, the forge's ruins smoldering behind him. His body was no longer his own. His augmetics were fused with fleshy growths, his skin mottled with green veins that pulsed faintly, even in the absence of the core. The voices were gone, but their absence left a void, a hollow ache where his humanity should have been. He was neither Scutarius nor Kale, but something else, a machine that wept, its tears the green ichor seeping from his wounds. His vox crackled to life, Tech Priest Calver 6's voice demanding a report, but Kale 9 could not answer. His words, like his mind, were fragmented, caught between duty and the lingering pull of the hybrid's promise. Stygian Hold's underhive swallowed him as he wandered, a ghost in its shadows. He passed hab blocks, where workers whispered of machines that moved without power, of augmetics that itched with unnatural life. The hybrid was not dead. Its fragments lingered in the hive's depths, in its people, in him. He saw his reflection in a shattered data slate, eyes hollow, glowing faintly green, a machine mourning its lost humanity. He was a warning, a living testament to the tyrannid's insidious reach, a herald of a threat the Imperium could not name. Note: inspired by suppressed Mechanicus records of tyrannid bioform experiments in Stygian Hold's underhive, hinting at a hybrid entity that persists in the hive's forgotten depths. The spire's air was sharp with incense and paranoia, a gilded cage perched atop Stygian Hold's rotting hive. Acolyte Theron of the Ordo Hereticus moved through the opulent halls of House Varn's ancestral manse, his black coat blending with the shadows cast by flickering electro candles. The noble house, once a pillar of the hive's elite, was unraveling. 7 of its kin had vanished in as many weeks, each last seen entering a mirrored chamber deep within the spire. Theron's augmetic eye whirred, scanning for warp taint, while his organic one caught the nervous glances of servants, their faces pale as the marble underfoot. The air carried a faint hum, not mechanical, but resonant, like a whisper trapped in crystal, stirring unease in his disciplined mind. Lord Varn, a gaunt man with eyes like polished obsidian, had summoned Theron under duress, his voice trembling as he spoke of the chamber, "It's cursed," he whispered, clutching a rosarius that no longer glowed. "They go in, and the mirrors take them." Theron dismissed the superstition. Nobles were prone to hysteria, but the pattern was undeniable. The vanished were key heirs, each tied to House Varn's political machinations, their absence threatening the house's influence in Stygian Hold's brutal hierarchy. The chamber, sealed since the Second Purge, was a relic of the house's founding, its purpose lost to time. Theron's inquisitorial mandate demanded answers, but the warp's subtle stink clung to the spire, a psychic residue that set his nerves alight. He descended spiraling staircases, past tapestries depicting House Varn's triumphs over orc invasions, their threads frayed by neglect. The lower levels grew colder, the air heavy with a metallic tang that reminded Theron of blood spilled in ritual. Servants refused to follow, muttering prayers to the Emperor, their eyes darting to unseen corners. At the chamber's entrance, a massive door of blackened adamantium loomed, etched with sigils that burned his augmetic eye to trace. The hum was louder here, a low thrum that vibrated in his bones, stirring memories he'd buried. His mentor's screams as a demon tore through a hive on Calaxis, his own hand pulling the trigger to end her suffering. He shook off the intrusion, blaming fatigue, but his hand lingered on his bolt pistol. The door groaned open, revealing a chamber lined with mirrors, their surfaces flawless yet unnaturally dark, reflecting no light from his lumen. The hum became a voice, not audible but felt, a sibilant whisper that promised secrets in exchange for surrender. Theron stepped inside, and the mirrors shifted, showing not his reflection, but fragments. His face younger, unscarred, then older, hollow-eyed, then not his face at all, but something with too many eyes, watching. His augmetic eye sparked, detecting warp fluctuations, but his instruments couldn't quantify the source. The chamber felt alive, its mirrors a trap for the mind, and Sauron sensed a presence, something ancient bound to House Varn, waiting for him to look too long. He tore his gaze away, focusing on the floor, where faint scratches formed patterns. Sigils, not imperial, but older, possibly Xenos tainted. His data slate logged the symbols, cross-referencing them with Ordo-Xenos archives, but the results were inconclusive, hinting at a forgotten cult from Stygian Hold's founding. The mirrors pulsed, and the whisper grew insistent, calling his name in a voice like his mentor's, soft and treacherous. Theron's hand tightened on his pistol, his faith in the Emperor warring with a growing dread that the mirrors saw more than his reflection. They saw his soul, and something within them wanted it. The mirrored chamber seemed to breathe, its walls of dark glass pulsing with a rhythm acolyte Theron could feel in his chest. The air in House Varn's forbidden sanctum was colder now, the metallic tang sharper, cutting through the incense haze that clung to Stygian Hold's upper spires. His augmetic eye whirred, its scans erratic, detecting warp fluctuations that danced beyond imperial metrics, like shadows slipping through a net. The mirrors, dozens, floor to ceiling, reflected nothing of the chamber's dim lumens, only fragments of Theron. His face scarred from Calaxis, his eyes wide with a fear he refused to name, and sometimes, not his face at all, but a formless thing with too many eyes, watching, waiting. The whisper in his mind grew clearer, no longer a hum, but a voice, soft and sibilant, promising truths no inquisitor could bear. Theron forced his gaze to the floor, where the scratched sigils glowed faintly, their curves alien yet familiar, like half-remembered nightmares. His data slate, tethered to his augmetic arm, cross-referenced the symbols against Ordo Hereticus archives, yielding fragments of a pre-imperial cult that worshipped the Watchers beyond. The records were redacted, sealed by an inquisitor long dead, but hinted at a ritual tied to House Varn's founding, a pact to secure power in Stygian Hold's brutal hierarchy. Theron's training screamed heresy, yet the mirror's pull was stronger, urging him to look to see what they held. He resisted, but his reflection moved without him, a shadow Theron stepping closer, its lips curling into a smile that wasn't his. He advanced, bolt pistol drawn, its weight a reminder of his duty. The chamber's center held a plinth, its surface etched with the same sigils, stained with dark streaks, blood, old but not ancient, as if the vanishings were part of something ongoing. His augmetic eye analyzed the stains. Human, noble-born, likely Varn kin. The whisper spoke again in his mentor's voice, the one he'd silenced on Calaxis. "Look, Theron, see what you've forgotten." His hand shook and he saw her in the mirrors, not as she died, but alive, her eyes hollow, beckoning him to join her. The vision was a lie, a warp trick, but it clawed at his resolve, stirring guilt he'd buried beneath years of service. He knelt by the plinth, prying open a hidden panel to reveal a data core, its circuits faintly warm, corrupted by a psychic residue his instruments couldn't quantify. Interfacing, he accessed fragmented logs. House Varn had sealed the chamber after a failed ritual during the Second Purge, when a warp storm tore through Stygian Hold. The logs spoke of a shadow bound in glass, a demon trapped by the house's ancestors, its power harnessed to elevate their status. But the demon had never left. It fed on ambition, fear, the very souls of Varn's heirs, drawing them into the mirrors. The vanishings were sacrifices, unwitting or otherwise, to sustain its prison, or to free it. The mirrors pulsed, and Theron's reflection stepped closer, its eyes glowing with a light that wasn't light, a void that drank his gaze. He fired at the mirror, the bolt shattering glass, but the fragments reformed, seamless, as if the chamber refused to break. The whisper laughed, a sound like breaking bones, and his augmetic eye sparked, overwhelmed by a surge of warp energy. His data slate logged a warning. The demon was no mere entity, but a fragment of something greater, tied to the warp's tides, using House Varn as a conduit to manifest. Theron's faith in the Emperor wavered, not from doubt, but from the weight of what he faced, a shadow that knew him, that saw the cracks in his soul. He backed toward the door, but the mirrors shifted, their surfaces rippling like liquid, showing not just him but the vanished nobles, their faces twisted in silent screams, their eyes hollow. The whisper grew insistent, offering power, offering answers, if he would only look longer. Theron clutched his rosarius, its metal cold, and prayed, but the words felt empty, drowned by the demon's voice. He was an Inquisitor's acolyte, trained to face the warp, but here, in the mirrored chamber, he was just Theron, a man staring into the abyss of his own making. The mirrored chamber tightened its grip on acolyte Theron, its air a suffocating shroud of cold and psychic static. The dark glass walls of House Varn's forbidden sanctum pulsed with a rhythm that clawed at his mind, each beat echoing the demon's whisper, a voice like his mentor's, now laced with a malice that twisted her memory into something profane. His augmetic eye flickered, overwhelmed by warp surges that defied his instruments, while his organic eye stung from the metallic tang of blood and incense, thick in the air of Stygian Hold's decaying spire. The mirrors no longer showed just Theron or the hollow-eyed nobles. They flickered with scenes of a hive in flames, a warp storm tearing through, and a shadowy figure crowned in void watching him. The demon was close, its presence a weight that pressed against his soul. Theron knelt by the plinth, its blood-stained sigils glowing faintly under his lumen's glare. His data slate, tethered to his augmetic arm, hummed as it decrypted more of the corrupted data core's secrets. The logs revealed House Varn's ancient sin. During Stygian Hold's founding, they had bargained with a warp entity, binding it within the mirrored chamber to secure their dominance. The ritual, etched in the sigils, was meant to trap the demon, channeling its power to fuel the house's ambition. But the pact was flawed. The demon fed on the Varn bloodline, drawing heirs into the mirrors, consuming their essence to weaken its prison. The vanishings were no accident. They were sacrifices, orchestrated by the demon to erode the ritual's wards. His reflection moved again, independent of him, its smile sharper, its eyes voids that pulsed with warp light. It raised a hand, mimicking his own, but its fingers dripped with shadow, curling as if to pull him in. Theron fired another bolt, shattering the mirror. But the glass reformed, seamless, laughing in a voice that wasn't sound, but pain. The whisper grew louder, speaking his fears. You failed her, Theron. You'll fail them all. It dug into his guilt, Calaxis, his mentor's death, the bolt he fired to end her possession. The demon knew, plucking memories from his mind like strings, each note unraveling his resolve. He clutched his rosarius, its metal now warm, as if mocking his prayers to the Emperor. He searched the chamber, desperate for answers, and found a hidden alcove behind a mirror, its frame etched with warnings in high Gothic. Inside was a tome, its pages brittle, inscribed with the ritual's full design. The text described the demon as a watcher in the void, a fragment of a greater chaos entity, bound by blood and will. To banish it, the ritual demanded a sacrifice, a soul strong enough to hold the demon's gaze without breaking. Theron's heart sank. He was no saint, no hero, just an acolyte scarred by doubt. The tome hinted at a counter-ritual, a way to reinforce the wards, but it required the blood of a Varn heir and a mind untainted by fear, qualities Theron doubted he possessed. The mirrors pulsed faster, and his reflection stepped closer, now wearing his mentor's face, her eyes hollow, her voice a hiss. Join us, Theron. Be whole. The chamber shook, the sigils on the floor flaring, and Theron felt his mind fray, memories bleeding into visions, a hive consumed by warp fire, House Varn's spire a beacon for the demon's release. His augmetic eye sparked, its scans detecting a surge in psychic energy, the demon testing its bonds. He realized the vanishings were a prelude. The demon was nearly free, needing only one more soul to shatter its prison. His reflection reached out, its hand passing through the mirror, cold as the void, and Theron stumbled back, his bolt pistol useless against a foe that lived in his mind. He clutched the tome, its pages cutting his fingers, blood dripping onto the sigils. The chamber responded, the mirrors glowing brighter, the whisper now a roar, promising power, promising absolution. Theron's faith wavered, not in the Emperor, but in himself. Could he face the demon without becoming its vessel? The mirrors closed in, their reflections a gallery of his failures, and he knew the next step would test not just his duty, but his very soul. The mirrored chamber was a cage of light and shadow, its walls closing in on acolyte Theron, as the demon's presence thickened the air. The mirrors of House Varn's sanctum pulsed with a sickening rhythm, their surfaces rippling like liquid void, reflecting not just Theron, but a kaleidoscope of his fears. His mentor's hollow eyes, the burning hive of Calaxis, his own face twisted into a mask of surrender. The air in Stygian Hold's spire was heavy with the reek of blood and warp taint, a psychic miasma that clawed at his mind, drowning his augmetic eyes' scans in static. The whisper was now a voice, clear and cruel, speaking in his mentor's cadence, but laced with a hunger that was not hers. "Theron, you are enough. Embrace me and be free." Theron clutched the ancient tome, its pages stained with his blood, the sigils on the floor flaring brighter with each drop. The counter-ritual it described was his only hope, to reinforce the demon's prison with a Varnair's blood and a will unyielding to fear. But the last true heir, Lord Varn, was a broken man, cowering in the spire's upper halls, his mind too frail to face the chamber. Theron's own will trembled. The demon's voice wove through his memories, pulling at the guilt of Calaxis, where he'd killed his mentor to stop a possession. His augmetic eye sparked, its scans useless against the warp's tide, and his rosarius burned hot in his hand, as if the Emperor himself judged his faltering faith. The mirrors moved, their frames grinding against the floor, encircling him. His reflection, no longer his own, stepped from the glass, a shadow Theron with eyes like black suns, its form shifting between human and something vast, formless, crowned in void. It spoke, its voice a chorus of the vanished nobles, their screams woven into promises of power. "Join us, Theron. Rule Stygian hold. End the decay." The demon's offer was a blade, cutting at his ambition, his secret desire to rise beyond an acolyte's station. He saw himself in the mirrors, not as he was, but as he could be, an inquisitor, revered, unscarred, the hive bowing before him. But the cost was clear. His soul, bound to the Watcher in the void. Theron staggered to the plinth, its sigils on now a blazing circle, the tome's instructions seared into his mind. The counter-ritual required blood and a chant to the Emperor, but the demon's presence made every word feel like betrayal. He sliced his palm deeper, blood pooling on the plinth, and began the chant, his voice hoarse. "By the Emperor's light, I bind thee." The mirrors screamed, a sound like shattering stars, and the shadow Theron lunged, its hand passing through his chest, cold as death, tugging at his soul. Pain seared through him, not physical but existential, as fragments of his memories, his childhood, his training, his mentor's laugh, slipped into the void, stolen by the demon's touch. He fought back, reciting the chant louder, each word a hammer against the demon's will. The mirrors cracked, their surfaces splintering, but the shadow grew stronger, feeding on his doubt. It showed him Calaxis again, not as it was, but as it could have been. His mentor saved, the demon banished, Theron a hero. The lie was intoxicating, and his chant faltered, his rosarius dimming. The shadow. Theron smiled, its hand tightening, and Theron felt his soul fray. Pieces of him trapped in the mirrors, his reflection now a hollow shell staring back. He was losing. The demon's embrace too strong, its promise too sweet. With a scream, Theron drove his bolt pistol into the plinth, firing into the blood-soaked sigils. The explosion shook the chamber, the mirrors wailing as the ritual's wards flared, binding the demon tighter. The shadow Theron recoiled, its form flickering, but it laughed, a sound that echoed in his skull. "You cannot banish what you are." Theron collapsed, the tome falling from his hands, his mind a battlefield of faith and fear. The demon was weakened, but not gone, and he knew the final act would demand everything he had left, or everything he feared to lose. The mirrored chamber was a wound in reality, its air thick with the acrid tang of blood and warp fume. The walls of House Varn's sanctum trembling, as if Stygian hold itself recoiled. Acolyte Theron knelt amidst shattered glass, his blood pooling on the plinth's glowing sigils, the ancient tome open at his feet. The demon's laughter echoed, not from the mirrors, but from within his skull, a cacophony of voices, his mentors, the vanished nobles, his own, promising power, absolution, eternity. His augmetic eye flickered, its scans drowned in warp static, while his organic eye burned, vision blurred by sweat and tears. The shadow Theron loomed before him, no longer a reflection but a presence, its form a writhing void crowned with eyes that saw through him into the cracks of his soul. The counter-ritual's chant hung on Theron's lips, each word a struggle against the demon's pull. "By the Emperor's light I bind thee," he rasped, his voice breaking as the sigils flared brighter, their light searing the air. The mirrors cracked further, their surfaces splintering into jagged webs. But the demon's laughter grew, feeding on his faltering will. It showed him visions, Stygian hold remade under his rule, its decay banished, House Varn kneeling at his feet. But the visions twisted, nobles with hollow eyes, a hive consumed by warp fire, Theron himself a puppet, his soul a shard in the demon's crown. The rosarius in his hand was cold, its faith a distant memory, and he felt the demon's hand inside him, tugging at his essence, stealing fragments of his past. Theron's mind frayed, memories of Calaxis bleeding into the present, his mentor's screams, the bolt he fired, the guilt he carried. The demon used it, weaving his pain into its promises. "You can save them all, Theron. Be my vessel." His augmetic arm twitched, no longer fully his, reaching for the tome as if to tear it apart. He saw his reflection in a shattered mirror, eyes hollow, face gaunt, a stranger wearing his skin. The demon was winning, its embrace a cold fire that burned away his resolve. But a flicker of defiance remained, a spark of the Emperor's light, buried beneath years of doubt. He was an acolyte, trained to face the warp, and he would not break. With a roar, Theron seized the tome, its pages cutting deeper into his bloodied hands, and drove it into the plinth's center, where his blood had pooled. He chanted louder, the words a blade against the demon's will. "In his name, I cast thee out." The sigils erupted in blinding light, the chamber shaking as the wards tightened, binding the demon back into its prison. The shadow Theron screamed, its form fracturing, eyes collapsing into voids. The mirrors shattered, glass raining down, each shard reflecting a piece of Theron, his fear, his guilt, his faith. Before dissolving into dust, the demon's laughter faded, replaced by a silence that was heavier than its voice, a void that left Theron gasping. He staggered from the chamber, the spire's halls now eerily still, the air cleansed of warp taint, but heavy with loss. His augmetic eye flickered, its scans clear, but his mind was scarred, fragments of his memories gone, trapped in the mirror's shards. He emerged to find House Varn in ruin. Servants fled, Lord Varn catatonic, muttering of eyes in the dark. The demon was bound, but Theron knew it lingered, a shadow waiting for another weak soul. His rosarius was dim, his faith a hollow echo, and as he descended the spire, his reflection in a cracked window showed eyes not his own, hollow, haunted, watching. Note: inspired by suppressed Ordo Hereticus reports of House Varn's pact with a warp entity, hinting at its lingering influence in Stygian Hold's upper spires.